Welcome to the fourth video of the Blender 2.8 Beginners Tutorial series, where we will model the 3D knife to cut our apples in half. Well, certainly we don't need a knife in 3D to cut the apples in half, but in the final image it should look like that, you know? Anyway, for that we will use a reference image which we put into the 3D viewport to make the modeling process easier for us, and while we are going we will learn more and more shortcuts to speed up the modeling and navigation process. As always, besides the timestamps, you can find the link to sign up to our resource section to download all the textures, blend files and videos for this project in the video description below. Hi everyone, my name is Zach for cgboost.com and let's get started. I've prepared a little image here for you, which we will use as modeling reference, but also we will use this for texturing the knife later on. So as you can see, I have this here in an external folder, and what I do, I simply drag and drop it into Blender's viewport. So now it's placed weirdly here in 3D space. What I do, I select this, and you know that the shortcut R is for rotation. And I showed you that you can reset the rotation over here by putting this back to 0, 0, 0. But there's an even quicker way to do that by simply pressing Alt R. So with Alt R, you reset the rotation, and the same works with scaling by pressing Alt S, and also for the position by pressing Alt G. So in this case I also press Alt G, so this object is now perfectly placed in the center. And in general this object is basically a 3D object, just like the apple, so we can use the transformation tools to scale, move and rotate this. However, this is a reference image object, that means this won't show up in the final rendering. That means we can only see it here in the 3D viewport, but if we output an image of our 3D scene, this won't show up. So let's go to the top view, and for now let's scale it down a bit. Although I have the real life measurement of this knife, for now I just measure it by my eyes compared to the apple so that it looks good. Later on, when we finished modeling the knife, we can rescale this if we like, but I guess in this case it's totally fine to go this way. This image here should be for the top view. That means I will roughly place the top view of the knife here on the red line. Let's hide the apple so it's not in the way. I always try to model new objects in the center of my scene because this makes modeling easier, especially when you deal with symmetry. Now let's move the object a bit downwards because this shouldn't cover the 3D object which we want to model. And I also need a reference from the side view. So let's go to the side view here, right click and click on duplicate objects, or simply press Shift D. Then you can move it somewhere. And now certainly we want to rotate this. And as you know, you can use the rotate tool over here or simply press R for rotation. But now it's rotating really strangely. So what we can do when we use the move, rotate or scale tool with the shortcuts, we can use additional shortcuts to lock the rotation or transformation in general to a certain axis. So in this case, I want to rotate along the x-axis, so I simply press X while the rotation is active. So now you can see it's locked along the x-axis, but I can also press Y or Z for the other axis. But in this case I want to have the x-axis, and in the top left corner you can see for how many degrees we have rotated the image, and we can also simply enter a number, for example 90, on the keyboard and hit enter to confirm, and then we have rotated this image for 90 degrees. You can also change the value down here afterwards if you like. Now let's take a look from the front view. Move this down a bit so that this also roughly aligns with the red x-axis. And now we have a good reference for modeling. We will model the knife in two separate objects. We will model the handle as one object and the blade as one object. Let's start with the handle. First of all, make sure that the 3D cursor is placed in the center of your scene because new objects will be placed on this spot. So if this is not in the center, right click and simply go to Snap and click on Cursor to World Origin. Now hit Shift A, go to Mesh and add a cube. This cube is way too big, so let's press S and scale it down. And now let's go to front view. And first of all, check if the height of this cube fits to the handle. And now let's go to top view and press S and lock this along the y-axis. So this locking also works for scaling and for moving. So let's scale it down. Now let's move it to the center here. Press S for scaling, X for the x-axis, and scale it so that this cube roughly covers the whole handle here. By the way, if you quickly want to change the views without always going up here, you can also do it with the numpad. You can simply change the views by pressing 1 for the front view. Up here you always see in which view you are right now. 3 for the right view and 7 for the top view. This only works with a numpad and not with the numbers above the letters. However, if you don't have a numpad, you can use this thing over here, or you go to Edit, Preferences, and in the Preferences you go to Input and click on Emulate Numpad. That means the numbers above the letters are now basically the numpad, and you can use these to navigate the view. So in my case, I don't need that. So 1 front view, 3 right view, and 7 top view. If you want to have the opposite, you can simply press the 9 on the numpad to switch between bottom and top, as you can see. Or if you are in the front view with numpad 1, you can press numpad 9 to go to the back view. Or if you have numpad 3 enabled with the right view, you can press numpad 9 for the left view. Let's go to front view, and as you can see, we have a little problem here. This box is basically covering the whole background image. So what I do, I select the background image, go down here to this little image icon. Here we can adjust a few settings for this reference image, and I set the depth to front. That means no matter where this object is placed, it will always show up in front. Looks a little bit weird, as you can see, but that's how it works. However, now the image is basically covering the object, so we also have to enable Use Alpha and reduce the transparency. Now this is placed in front of the object with a little bit of transparency. Let's go to the top view, numpad 7, select the other image and basically do the same thing. Depth to front, Use Alpha and reduce the transparency. So, and now we finally can start modeling the knife. So let's select this cube thing and with tab go to edit mode. First of all, make sure that X-ray is enabled. That means we can also work with the vertices, edges and faces which are on the other side, which we don't see. And if we are in front view, we basically don't see what's going on the other side. So the X-ray option is really important here. So first of all, let's add a few loop cuts. So either use the loop cut tool, or if you don't want to do that, you can also use the shortcut Ctrl-R. Now, as you can see, when I hover my mouse above this cube, I get a preview line. And the cool thing is when you use the shortcut, you can scroll the mouse wheel to add more cuts. In the bottom left corner, you can see how many cuts we will add. So I will add 4 for now. Then I confirm with left click. Take care, because now you automatically enter the slide mode that you can slide these along the surface. If you don't want to do that, simply hit escape. Now we have the cuts where they should be. So with the box select tool enabled, I select these vertices here. And since I have X-ray enabled, I also automatically select the one on the other side. So let's go back to front view and simply press G to move it around. So right now we just try to roughly match the shape of this knife. Let's press Ctrl-R and add another loop cut over here. And move this down a bit. And let's also add one over here. And move these also down a bit. So if I disable X-ray and tap to object mode, you can see that this object is certainly way too angular. And that's why we add again a subdivision surface modifier, similar as for the apple. So let's click on that. And let's increase the viewport and render subdivisions to 3. The difference between viewport and render is the viewport is only showing up when we edit stuff here in the 3D viewport, And for rendering, that means the subdivisions when we output an image later on. So you can have different subdivisions for the final output and the viewport. This is useful if you want to have a lower resolution in the viewport, for example, so that the viewport maybe runs faster, because the more objects and the higher resolution you have, this might slow down your viewport. And that's why we have two sliders for the same thing, basically. So now this is really smooth, but as you can see here in the reference image, we have this quite sharp edges. So let's go to the front view, tap into edit mode, and let's add a loop cut similar as we did for the stamp of the apple. So I press Ctrl R and move this closer to the edge, and then you can see the edge gets a bit sharper. Also, as you can see here from the top view, we have this angular shape, and this we also want to create. So first of all, let's hit Ctrl R and add a loop cut directly in the center of the knife. Let's go to top view, numpad 7. Let's select this one here, and then with Shift, we draw another box over here. Now let's press G for moving. And as you can see, I made a little mistake here because I forgot to enable X-ray. And that's exactly what happens. You basically move this stuff around and the stuff on the other side wasn't selected. So let's press Ctrl Z to undo this. Let's get back to top view and enable X-ray. And let's do this again. Press G for moving, lock this along the X-axis and move it a bit to the side here. Now, if I quickly hide the two empty objects, go to object mode and disable X-ray, you can see that we don't have this sharp line here in the center. So let's get back to edit mode. Alt left click on this edge, so we select the whole loop here around the knife. And now let's use the bevel tool over here to bevel this. So I simply left click somewhere in the 3D viewport and hold and move my mouse to add a little bevel. And here we basically do the same thing as we did over here. We add two edges which are very close to each other, and then this hard edge will be created. Now let's tap back to object mode, and this is basically the handle we have here. If I re-enable the reference images, you can see we have these little metal cylinders over here, but we won't add them to the knife because we want to keep the model of the knife relatively simple, and these little cylinders will be added to the knife through the texture later on anyway. So let's hide the two images, right click and click on Shade Smooth. The handle here needs to be selected. Let's double click on the name cube over here. And let's call it knife handle, so we know exactly which object is what. And one last thing, I press N. You can see, since we scaled the object in the beginning in object mode, the scale values are non-uniform. And as I told you in the previous video, we have to press Ctrl A and apply the scale. So Blender knows that this new scaling of the object is a new default scaling of the handle. Don't forget to save with Ctrl S. Alright, now let's model the blade of the knife. For that, first of all, let's unhide the two reference images. Still make sure that the 3D cursor is in the center here. And now let's hit Shift A, go to Mesh and add another cube. Let's go to the front view, numpad 1, and scale it down so that this roughly has the height of the blade here. But there's one thing we do here, because as you can see down here, we can see the blade if we look from the top view onto the knife, but we didn't model the cutout part inside of the handle. So we do a simple trick here. We just move this slightly above the wooden part here, so we can still see the metal later on. That means we also have to scale this along the x-axis, so that on the one hand, this fits the size of the blade up here, but also to this point over here. So let's move it and scale it until everything fits. Now let's take a look from above, numpad 7. And now let's scale this as along the y-axis to make the width as wide as it should be, something like this. And now, as always, we change the scale of the object, so we press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now everything is back at 111. So now let's tap into edit mode, make sure that X-ray is enabled. And before we shape this into the shape of the knife, let's add the sharp edge down here. So for that, let's go to the select box tool and simply select the part down here, press S for scaling, in this case Y for the Y-axis, and now simply enter 0 on your keyboard and hit enter to confirm. Now we basically have this shape here, but still we have a little problem, because if I left click one vertex down here, you can see this mesh just lies on top of each other. And this can cause problems later on. So I again select this, and we can merge vertices which are on top of each other. They need to be selected. Then let's go to Vertex, Merge Vertices, and then click on By Distance. Now, as you can see, 2 vertices were removed because they were merged here. And if I now select one of those, you can see they belong together. Now let's go to the front view, numpad 1. And now let's start shaping the object. In this case, we won't use a subsurf modifier because this object has very sharp edges. So first of all, let's use the loop cut tool or press Ctrl R and add a loop cut over here. Another one roughly in the center of the blade. And that's basically it. Why, I will tell you in a second. Then select this here, press G, move it up a bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. And we will add the bending over here in just a second. And let's also move this down just a bit. So basically I added this cut over here so that we have a straight line of the metal over here so that we can see it as we see it down here. Because if I just would connect these two over here, then at some point the metal would disappear inside of the wood, and this we don't want. And this we just add to add a little bit of bending to the knife. So first of all, let's select these two, which basically also selects the edge inside here. And let's get back to the front view. And now let's use the bevel tool. So I left click and hold and then move it around to add a bevel. And if I now confirm this, you can see that we have some options down here. So let's increase the segments, and you can see that we now can add a little bit of this nice roundish bending. But make sure that you don't add too much, because this can at some point destroy the geometry. And you can also play around with the widths so that this fits perfectly over here. Then let's go back to the select box tool. Let's move this up a bit. And let's also select this whole loop over here and do another bevel. But you don't always have to use the tool. You can also press Ctrl B to enter the bevel tool. And the cool thing is, when you use the shortcut, you can also scroll your mouse wheel to add loops in between. So now basically we don't have this harsh edge over here on the knife. Now this is a long, smooth bending. And if you like, you can do the same thing over here. Ctrl B. Maybe don't add too much cuts, maybe just 2. Now let's hide the 2 empties here and check how this looks without X-ray. I think this looks quite nice. So let's select this, right click, shade smooth. And now you can see this looks kind of weird. And there are basically 2 ways to fix this. On the one hand, you could go down here to this little mesh icon, go to normals and click on auto smooth. Then only faces with a certain angle to each other will be smoothed, and angles which are above this, as here for example, just get a very sharp edge. But I still want to have a little bit of bevel over here. So I keep auto smooth enabled, this is important, but I go over to the modifiers and add a bevel modifier. The bevel modifier adds this nice little beveled edge over here. And I can also change the width if I like. If you hold down Shift while changing this, you can change this more precisely. So I just want to have a very tiny edge, and I want to have this look more roundish. So what we can do, we can enable harden normals. As you can see, this adds this very nice smooth looking shape, but this only works well if you have auto smooth enabled. As you can see, if this is disabled, this looks ugly. So let's get back to the modifier, and you can see that this edges over here will also be beveled. And this looks also weird. We want to have a very smooth flat surface over here. And to change this, we can basically set the limit method to angle. And then again, only angles which are above 30 degrees will be beveled. And in this case, these up here won't be beveled. And now we have this very tiny beveled edge, which later on reflects the light very nicely, and then the whole thing looks beautiful. So let's call the object knife blade. And there's one thing we need to do, because right now, if I select the handle and move it around, the blade just stays where it is. But since the object here uses a subsurf modifier and this uses a bevel modifier, I can't simply join those two objects, which I have done with the stem and the apple. So what we do instead, we leave both objects separated, but we parent them. Parenting means we basically stick one object to another, but they are still separate. So in order to do that, select the blade, then with Shift, the handle, right click, go to Parent and click on Object. Now, over here in the hierarchy, you can see that the blade is now inside of the handle. That means if I select the handle and move it around or rotate this, the blade sticks with this handle, but if I select the blade, I can still move it freely. You can see this dotted line which is connected to this handle, so it will always move along with it. Let's undo this. And if you want to unparent something, you basically select this, right click, go to parent, and then click on clear parent. All right, now we have a nice knife and a nice apple. And we can also delete the two reference images here because we don't need them anymore. Make sure to save this blend file. Yeah guys, now you have a rough idea on how to create hard surface objects in Blender. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below. And if you want to get notified for future videos, make sure to ring the bell underneath this video. In this video, we just scratched the surface of all the modeling tools we have in Blender. If you want to learn more about these modeling tools and get a deeper look on all the settings and options we have, make sure to check out our comprehensive Blender 2.8 Launchpad course, where we will learn all the important things about all these tools and also make use of them while creating this nice animated car scene. If you want to learn more, check the link in the video description. Thanks a lot for watching guys. Now check the next video where we will create the bowl, the wooden planks, and then use these as collision objects for a simple claw simulation to create this piece of fabric. I will see you there. Goodbye.